Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. The UIAAA would not be able to broadcast this podcast without the support of our business partners. Thank you to all of the gold and silver business partners of the UIAAA, BSN Sports, and our contact, Jeremy Macy. Final Forms, AMP, with contacts Julie Renner and Clay Burnett. Granite Canyon Wealth and our contact, Megan Palazzo. Jostens and our contact, Molly Shaheen. NCSA, Next College Student Athlete, and our contact, Paul Putnam. VNN Varsity News Network and our contact, Jason Jones. Thanks again to all of the gold and silver UIAAA business partners.
Welcome to this edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter, Executive Director of the UIAAA, and today we're excited to have the Associate Executive Director from the NIAAA, Phil Rison, who is a Certified Master Athletic Administrator. Phil, how are you?
Great, Mark. It's great to be with you and excited to have the opportunity to share with you and rekindle some relationships with the UIAAA.
That's great, thanks. So let's hop right into it. Tell us any stories that stick out from your youth participation, sports, high school sports, where you grew up, that type of thing.
Well, probably you can tell from the accent. I'm not a Hoosier. I'm originally from Kentucky, born and raised around central Kentucky, around Lexington. It's true, when we're born in Kentucky, they put a basketball in our crib, and they also tell us that we have to say "Go Big Blue." But I was blessed, Mark, to have two wonderful parents, Johnny and Barbara Rison. They were just phenomenal. Raised my brother and I. I have a brother that's 7 years older than I am, and we were raised in a little town called Ravenna, Kentucky, and went to a little elementary school there, and then from there went into the high school. And athletics has been a part of our life. It was a part of our father's life. He was an official. When he got out of the Army, when he got finished in Korea, he came out and he was a basketball official, and then he coached Little League Baseball, and then he ultimately ended up being the timer for the football and basketball team for almost 37 years there at the high school. And so it's just been opportunity where we were raised. It was it was a childhood that when I reflect back, I thank God for that. I had two wonderful parents and was able to be raised in a small community and with a lot of love and a lot of individuals that were serving the youth to make us better as we move forward in our life.
Okay, so let me touch on your story about the Big Blue. So obviously, maybe Jimmy Watkins would disagree with you. So is the state split in half? The closer you are to, let's see if I say it right, Louisville. The closer you are to Louisville, they go cards, or is pretty much Kentucky the big dog and Louisville's trying to catch up?
Well, let me first of all say this. I think the University of Kentucky expansion is greater than the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Louisville is predominantly, their fan base would be in the Jefferson County area, which is the Louisville area. But when we talk about the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville, I've got to really speak kudos to the University of Louisville in the sense that, number one, I can tell you in that small community that I was raised, everybody pretty much wore a UK hat or clothing attire or whatever. But then what I saw happen after I left was a gentleman who I grew up with his brothers. His name was Brian Kaiser, and he was about a 6'7" swingman who ended up signing with the University of Louisville and playing for Coach Denny Crum. And I saw, my father included, because of the closeness of that community and the closeness that family within that community, I saw a lot of people start to wear that red. and support that young man because he was such an outstanding young man. And so, and just as a side note, that young man hit a three to beat UCLA in Poly Pavilion. And if you ask anybody in that small community where they were during that time, they can tell you when that young man hit that three. His name was Brian Kaiser. He played for the University of Louisville.
Is that during the Denny Crum era or before?
That was during the Denny Crum era, toward the end of the Denny Crum era.
Okay.
And Brian, I played with Brian's brothers. And my brother, who was a longtime basketball coach, ended up coaching one of his brothers. And so anyway, make a long story short, I think it's not split. It's pretty much predominantly blue, but through the connections and through Jim Watkins with the University of Louisville and what they did for the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association, what a lot of people don't know is that they, for the last several years, last 15 years, University of Louisville has hosted the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Awards Banquet. And they foot the whole bill. They pay for the food, and it's been hosted at Papa John's Stadium for the last 15 years. And it's
Awesome.
It's an event. And it's really nice, and so their service to the local schools there in Jefferson County and to the Kentucky AD Association is much appreciated. And so let me just say it this way: when Kentucky's playing Louisville, I'm for Big Blue. When Louisville's playing, I pull for Louisville.
All right, I like that. So one more quick question with the Utah connection. So this young man you talked about, was he in the same playing group that Daryl Griffith was, or was he after him?
No, he was after Daryl Griffith. Matter of fact, he was after Nervous Purvis. He was toward the end of Denny's tenure. And with that being said, the young man basically wasn't even recruited all year by the University of Louisville. And what happened is he went to the Kentucky-Indiana All-Star tryouts, and Coach Crum saw him play, and his father had played at Eastern Kentucky University. And so his father saw Coach Crum saw him play. He played really well, and from that he offered him a scholarship. And the young man, who has served Fellowship of Christian Athletes since he graduated from the University of Louisville, and now is working abroad in Israel, primarily has represented the University of Louisville, represented his community exceptionally well, and we're all very proud of him.
That's a great story. The reason I bring up the Golden Griff, of course, as you know, because he spent his career with the Jazz, and of course everybody in Utah loves the Griff. So
and what a great athlete, and his service and his give back to the community has been outstanding.
All right, so let's go. Did you play collegiately? Did you play in high school? I assume. Sure, you did.
Yeah, I played high school ball, basketball, and baseball predominantly, and played football up until I went to high school, and then kind of focused because of my size a little bit on basketball and baseball. Was fortunate enough to play for two outstanding coaches. And from there, I went to a junior college down in Alabama, down around Mobile, Alabama, to play basketball and baseball, and was there for a year. And kind of, Mark, it was a situation where I didn't feel like had nothing to do with athletically, but I also knew that my days of the dream of playing in the NBA or Major League Baseball wasn't going to happen. And so I was in love with a wonderful lady, and her name was Paula. And so I moved back to Kentucky, and I went to Eastern Kentucky University, and I walked in Coach Max Good's office, who was the basketball coach at EKU. And I said, Coach, I want to coach someday. And I said, I'd like to be a part of your program if there's something you can do, that you feel like I could help you with. He said, young man, we got a role for you. And so for the next 3 years there at Eastern Kentucky University, I served as a manager. Lane Green and I have often talked about the fact I got to serve as a manager at EKU. He got to serve as a manager at Kansas. And I said, I'm sure your games were probably a little more exciting, but I said, I can tell you, we did go to Auburn and play whenever Charles Barkley was playing. We did go to Memphis and play whenever Keith Lee was playing. And I said, we did play Louisville when Scooter and Rodney McRae were playing in Freedom Hall. So I said, got a lot of great memories, a lot of good friendships, and Coach Good was just absolutely phenomenal. And I was able to be involved with something I loved, but also while I was there, obtain my business education degree.
Excellent, excellent. So let me ask you, you obviously mentioned the one coach you went to at East Kentucky, but were there other coaches or bosses who served as mentors for you in your path along the way to get you where you are now?
Yeah, I'm indebted to Jack Robinson, who was my coach at Faulkner State Junior College in Bay Minette, Alabama, who signed me as a senior and brought me down. I'm indebted to him because he's a lifelong friend. And even when I departed down there after my first year, we've remained close friends. And matter of fact, we were texting last night because he's a diehard Alabama fan, and we were texting last night. He coached 42 years, and I'm indebted to him and the type of man and the witness that he presented to me. My high school basketball coach was just phenomenal. Just a great man who encouraged us, challenged us, and was a very positive influence in my life. And then, again, Mark, I got to say, my father was instrumental in my life, instrumental in the sense that here was a man who served in Korea for 24 months and predominantly got up every day and went to work, and after work came home. And then at that point, he was giving it back to my brother and I. And so sharing with us his skills and his talents and encouraging us and challenging us. And so, again, those men, and then my mother, who's still living today, is just a blessing. And she was the rose between many thorns in our family, we often say. And so with that, those individuals, and then, I got to be honest, as we get later in life, I think my minister, when I was working at the school district I worked at for most of my career, my minister at the church I attended had great influence. And then I'm not going to lie to you, I think the people that we come in contact with, the Mark Hunters, the Bruce Whiteheads, the Mike Blackburns, the Daryl Nances, the individuals like that, the Gene Ashens, people like that you come in, Doug Kilgore, I could just keep naming them that you come in contact
Sure.
with in our profession that have an impact on you. And if you are a sponge and you want to learn and you want to grow as a person, you learn from everything. And I remember my father always used to say in life, he said, understand, from people, sometimes you can learn what to do, and sometimes you can learn what not to do. And so make sure as you observe people in life, make sure you take the trait of learning what you need to do in order to continue to serve. And so those are just a few. Yeah.
Great advice. Thanks for sharing that. So let me switch gears a little bit. So I understand that you were an assistant superintendent in Mount Sterling, which I checked my map. So it's got to be what, 30, 40 miles east of Lexington, right?
Correct. It's about 26 miles. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question is your path with the Kentucky Association and the NIAAA maybe a little bit different than others? Because I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, but there's not a whole lot of assistant superintendents that are actually participating and active members of the NIAAA. So speak to that if you could.
Well, I think first of all, Mark, I got started in the NIAAA through as just a high school athletic administrator.
Mm-hmm.
In 1997, primarily got started with that role as a high school administrator. And I can remember going to my first Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Conference, and Jim Watkins kind of putting his arm around me and saying, hey, man, have I got plans for you? And from that, I started getting involved, more active, started networking, started teaching, doing some workshops, presenting and working right there. And then in my job at my local school district, I got to be honest, I think I finally kind of felt like that I was working for a great principal. And I just felt like, someday he's going to step aside and then maybe I'll be the principal and whatever. And that's great. And then, we'll get through that process. And my superintendent at the time walked in up there and he said, Phil, he said, I'd like for you to be director of operations. And I said, we don't have a director of operations. He said, we're going to now.
He said, we do now.
And he said, I would like for you to do that. And he said, I want you to be over transportation, food services, and buildings and grounds. And I said, I'm not interested unless it includes athletics. He said, fair enough. So he said, we'll make you over beans, balls, buses, and buildings. And so from that point, Mark, I served in that role from 2003 until right around 2008. And then from that, I was promoted to assistant superintendent over operations. And I've often said there wasn't really any difference in the job, just a title. It was more, as my superintendent always used to say, more job enrichment. So during that time, knowing my passion for athletics, I was fortunate enough to have the support of my administration to be able to continue to serve the NIAAA, be able to continue to serve the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association. And with that, I was able to make some awesome connections in areas that assisted the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association, because I was attending superintendent meetings and things like that, and able to make some connections with them that ultimately helped us as we continue to try to get some bylaws proposed and changed for professional development for the athletic directors in the state of Kentucky.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to 2007, because 2007 would have been the first time that you and I met at the national conference, and you were a recipient of this Distinguished Service Award. And so I know maybe the people across the nation don't know you by that nickname, but the people in Utah do, because obviously you attended our conference here a couple of years ago. But tell us about where that nickname that you got came from.
Well, first of all, I was honored in 2007 in Opryland in Nashville to be recognized as a Distinguished Service Award winner for the NIAAA, and what an honor. And I look back at some of those photos of that group that was in there, and I think, well, I don't belong in that group. But then, there was a gentleman who was the chairman of the awards committee. And, and you go back to what I said earlier, and I really want to emphasize this. It's the little things. It's the little things that stand out, that make you recognize how special people are. And that chairman gave me a card that day as well. And I still have that card. I have every card that has ever been given to me that is written. And I tell my daughter and my son, someday when the good Lord decides to take me home, make sure you read that, because people have taken time to write something about your father. And I said, either good, bad, or indifferent, I want you to be able to look at that. And then I want you to also know, man, I had a great life. And so anyway, to make a long story short, when we met for the first time, you being Mark Hunter and quick-witted and real whatever, when you called me Bad Moon Rising, and of course at the time, I don't know if I was thinking about CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival, or not, but we have since tied it into that. And just so you know, it is advanced to the point where some of my loved ones, my ringtone will be, CCR. Whenever I call, they know who it is.
Well, it's as you well know, that's the ringtone on my phone, because I can tell whenever you call. So that's a great story.
But again, I do want to emphasize, it's the little things. It's the little things that we can do for people that make them feel special, that we never know the impact. And we need to know the impact that we can have day by day by doing the little things.
That is so well said. If our listeners get nothing else from this podcast except for that, it's worth the listen. So let's now go to, and I'm not even sure, but it's got to be maybe 5 years ago. Obviously, there's an opening at the NIAAA. Now you're down at Mount Sterling in Kentucky. I think you may have even probably been the executive director of Kentucky at that time. And then you decided to make the jump and apply for that associate executive director job. that's a big step, particularly at someone, I don't want to say we're older, but we're a little bit more along than some of the younger ADs. So what went into that thinking, and how tough was that move? Because I mean, obviously you're a born and raised Kentuckian, and now you gotta drive to Louisville and then straight up north up to Indianapolis.
Well, you're right. I had been serving 18 months. I served as the executive director for the Kentucky High School Athletic Directors Association. After Jim Watkins had retired, I was appointed that position by the board, and I had just recently retired. And to be honest with you, Mark, really thought Paula had one more year of teaching before she was eligible to retire. And we kind of felt like, I might play a little golf. We're going to be around the grandkids and whatever. And I did that for a little bit. And while I served the AD Association the year I was not working, I got to go to and attend a lot of superintendent meetings on behalf of the ADs and whatever. And it kind of rekindled a little bit more of a passion in the sense of what I was doing and what my role could be and whatever. And so I don't mind saying that when Bruce Whitehead made the announcement and then the board elevated Mike Blackburn to executive director, I got a phone call. And it's the little things. And it was a guy named Bruce Brown. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know what you're doing, and I don't even know if you'll consider it. But he said, I think there's a position you need to apply for. And so as I got more into it, I first knew that the hard sell would be with my bride of 34 years. And I went to her and I said, I'm thinking about applying for this job. And she said, I don't know if I want to live in Indiana. And I said, well, I understand. But I said, all I'm going to ask you to do is, will you pray about it? And let's pray about it. And let's see where it takes us. And let's just trust. And as we got more into the process, she became more in support. And we talked about our life. We felt like that we still had things we could do. And so with that, I made application and there were some great applicants, and just was fortunate enough and blessed and honored and humbled to be selected. And as you said, it has been 5 years, and it's been a quick 5 years, but it's been a 5 years of, I've been completely blessed with the opportunity to be able to serve our members and serve them in a capacity that supports them. I hope they would say, man, Phil Rison supports us, because I want to support them. I want them to know that I understand the job they're doing on a daily basis and how hard it is to go into the educational building and make a positive influence with their student athletes and their coaches. So that was kind of it. And, like the old adage is, the rest is history. It's been 5 years, and I've really enjoyed working with Mike. He's such a blessing, to the point of we're kind of fire and ice. I'm excited, fired up, and he's just as smooth and just, and as Absolutely. Calm. And by us serving together, what we witnessed in that boardroom is just the way he is in person and in the day-to-day office here at 9100.
Well, let's talk. So you brought up the our time, at least on the board, and so but I want to talk more at a general level. Let's share with the Utah members, the NIAAA members. Now, of course, to serve on the board is obviously a once in a lifetime experience, an experience not too many get. You and I were fortunate enough to serve on there. You obviously served as president for a year, which was incredible. But let's talk about possibly maybe even committee involvement, or just some of the younger ADs out there, how to start to become involved. Because I certainly, my first conference was 1997 in Nashville, and I never saw myself starting in 2009 as a board member, but that's, things happen because things happen. So speak to the general population about the importance of involvement in the NIAAA, and maybe more important in your state association.
Well, I think you touched on two great points there. First point I want to reiterate and make sure people understand. I know for me, when you say timing is everything, for me to be in the position I was in Kentucky and to be selected to serve on the board, understand Kentucky only gets a board member every 24 years. So I was just happened to be in the right position in Kentucky in the leadership role to be selected as the Section 2 rotation came around. So it is definitely, and as we've often said, a lot of people could serve in that room, but sometimes timing does not allow it. Then the second thing you mentioned, and I want to make sure we talk about that in the sense is involvement. How do I get involved? And what can I do to get involved? Well, first of all, the first thing I would say to anyone that says, I want to get involved, roll up your sleeves. And first of all, within your state, you need to show within your state that you want to serve, that you want to teach, that you want to do workshops, that you want to be on a committee. And sometimes, Mark, as you well know, in some states, it might be just raising your hand and saying, hey, I'll do that. If it's not, if there's a formal process, then I would encourage you to get involved in that formal process and keep filling out an application. You know, as yourself, here at the NIAAA, we have right now currently 14 standing committees. And if you take 8 to 16 members on each of those committees, depending on the committee size, at that point with 12,000 members, we don't really have a lot that get the, just to serve on a committee is an honor. But you have to fill out the application. You're going to have to attend the conference. That's part of serving on the committee. And then you could also get involved through leadership training. Leadership training in the sense that you could be teaching at your state level. We have an application process for all of our national faculty for them to fill out and complete. And then at that point, working through our state coordinators, we try to get the best of the best in those situations. And I got to say this is a side note. What we experienced with the virtual conference with our leadership training was absolutely phenomenal. I have not read the first bad evaluation, and that speaks to the volume of our instructors, and it speaks in volume to the quality of individuals we got that are sharing their talents and their skills with our members. But you know, I think you just got to want to get involved, and sometimes it might just be, you just got to say, hey, I'll do that. And action creates a reaction, and by you showing action, sometimes we'll react to the point to where then you will be called on to do more. And I just think sometimes with, I don't want to stereotype this or make it an age demographics, but I think sometimes to sit back and observe and not get actively involved is not the answer. And I think you've got to be engaged.
No, and I couldn't agree more. I just, let me add, and of course, this is a shout out to Donnie Bell's a good friend of ours. And of course, I have no idea what he saw in me in 1999, but I remember when he said, hey, come be, and it was 590 back then, and not 790, that he says, come on the 590 staff. And I thought, oh, you're asking me? I'm barely starting out in my my trail in the NIAAA. But I said yes. And then, of course, I think I've been the chair of that course for 3 rewrites.
Yes.
I mean, it's been a while. So I think it's like you said, timing, and just when someone asks you, just grab a hold of that chance and move with it. So let's talk about the job of athletic administrator today, because you're so involved in it at the national level. Think back to when you started over 20 years ago, your first AD job, when it was probably 25 years ago in the 90s. How is that different today than it was back then?
I think it's different in the aspect of, number one, the requirements, and number two would be, I think back then you were more of a manager. Mm-hmm. You managed. You were the guy that had the keys that pretty much allowed the visiting team in, and then you predominantly, would get the officials a drink at halftime, and you would make sure that the bus, maybe we had buses here and whatever. And I think what we've seen progress over the last 20 years is that you're a leader now. You're an administrator, administrating in the sense that you have to direct and you have to correlate primarily the ethical components of your program, from the standpoint of who you hire, from the standpoint of what you do in accordance with your bylaws and your regulations. And also, primarily, you're the vision driver. And you get to drive a vision of what the experience is for your student athletes. And so when I think it's changed, I think now for an athletic administrator, it's a little more in the sense of business. In the business component of, you have to be ingrained in not only what's going on from the standpoint business wise, you've got to think about how you're spending your money, how you're allocating your money, who you're allocating your money for. And then the other thing, and the great thing about it is besides being business, you almost have to be a legal expert. I often, and from a legal standpoint, you got to think about if, the quid pro quo, if I do this, if I make this decision, this could happen. And it's not necessarily that you're afraid to make decisions, but you're informed in the cause and effect of any decision that is made and the repercussions that it could bring. As an athletic administrator, you are a risk manager for your school district, and you manage that risk to the point to where you make sure all of the individuals working under your guidance are aware of all of those. And Mark, it's changed in the sense, depending on where you're at. Indiana is a phenomenal state. Utah is really good in the sense that their athletic administrators, that's their role. That's their full-time responsibility. You and I know, and we've heard stories to where you might have an athletic administrator that's teaching 5 periods and still trying to manage athletics. And so as we progress and as we get further, I think one of the things our charge is for the NIAAA, we want to make sure that others understand the professionalism requirement of being an interscholastic athletic administrator. And so the difference is, nowadays, they just don't pitch you the keys. And they just don't pitch you the keys and say, hey, take care of all this. They want you to take the keys, but they also want you to manage all of those components to where it reduces risk within your school district and keeps, the old adage is, as Lee Green would say, keep your school district out of court.
No, absolutely. And of course, the rise of the leadership training program, just about that time, we had Leon as our first guest here a couple of weeks ago. And the certification and the professional development, I think the rise in that with the NIAAA, you can see what the effect it's had on the job. So let's talk it. Let's get a final couple of questions in here. I'll let you get back to work. What's the favorite part of your job now? I know it was different when you were an active athletic administrator, but you're still an athletic administrator, but you're in a different role in the national office.
Well, the best part of my job is that the people. First of all, I work with the most awesome staff. Our staff is just phenomenal, and they work so diligently and so hard to serve our members. And then the people, I can't tell you, when my phone rings and I look over here and on my caller ID, it says who it is. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I get a phone call from Dwayne Kramer. And we sit there and talk for 15 minutes, just catching up, and to make sure that, Dwayne was asking questions about the conference and whatever. So no doubt the greatest thing with my job is the people, getting to deal with the people, getting to talk to the people. And I want to say it this way, Mark. I can understand why someone in the school might say that's not their favorite part. I know as an assistant superintendent for 7 years, I can't say sometimes that was my favorite part, because most of the time I might have been dealing with the negative. And sometimes as we deal with a negative to where maybe something punitive is involved, it's hard to internalize that and feel good about that all the time. I think in this role, the 99 times out of 100, when I pick that phone up, it's a positive, and it's positive people, and it's feeding me energy that helps me in my role. And I hope in return, I'm feeding them energy. So no doubt with the, in this office, in this role, it's the people.
Well, and I think you're right. I remember hearing about the NIAAA family in the early 90s when I was just becoming involved in my state association. I was an NIAAA member, hadn't been in any national conferences. Some of the guys had talked, Evan Exel, Dave Norquist, about the NIAAA family, and I thought, that's kind of, that's not really, I don't know what they're saying, because that can't be that. That's kind of a pie in the sky. But once you have those connections in the NIAAA, and once you have friends across the country that you can call to share issues with, to get answers to, it's hard to discuss. Obviously, you and I know because we're part of that family now, but we weren't always part of that family. But I guess the message is to our listeners here in Utah and across the country is that get to be part of that family, because it's incredible. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I'll add, by being a past participant of the UIAAA Spring Conference, you have that in Utah. It's a culture that when you go into another state and you get around the athletic administrators, it's a culture that you can see, you can feel it, and you have that in Utah. And not only do you have that, you have great representatives who are not only serving the UIAAA, but they're serving the NIAAA and have served it in great distinction.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And of course, we're lucky to have lucky to have Rich Barton, former past president. Of course, Jamie Sheets, who's on the board now. And that's both of those at-large winners when, as you know, Utah gets a turn every 15 years, which is more often than the Kentucky turn.
Right. Mark, I was thinking when you reached out to ask me if I wanted to do this, just in my short tenure, when you think about it, I've had the honor to serve with you, the honor to serve with Rich, and the honor to serve with Jamie. And all three of us have been in that boardroom, and we know what goes on in that boardroom and how the decisions are made and how the members of our association are put forward. But I know this, I'm a better person today because of serving with the three of you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. So let's finish up with a couple of questions. My first one is, if you could pick two items to share with a new athletic administrator, and by new, I don't necessarily mean first year, but maybe someone in the first 1 to 4 years, they're still trying to get a hold of things. What two things would be essential advice for them, for you to give to them, to help them along their athletic administrative journey?
I think the first thing is they need to have the need to network within either their district or their region or their state. They've got a network. And through that network, a lot of states, and we're trying to promote it, are trying to emphasize the mentoring component. And I hope we can get to where in all of our states to where a veteran, an athletic administrator who's been through several tour of duties is able to serve and guide and mentor young athletic administrators. If we don't, we're going to get good people into the field, and they're going to become disenchanted with some of the responsibilities and duties. And then at that point, they're going to leave. So we have to have a good mentoring program. So I think networking is one that they need to be cognitive of. And then the one thing I tell young ADs on them, soak it up. Soak it up. And when I say soak it up, I'm talking about leadership training. If you want to learn and if you want to get better, and I'll promote the National Federation and their educational learn. You could go on there as an athletic administrator and you could look at their courses, and several of those are free, and you can engage and get yourself better. And so soak it up as a young athletic administrator. Try to try to get as much information as you can in a manner in which is quality professional development. So I think two things for me, I would say you got to network. You got to network, whether that's a 14 district or an 18 district or a 16 region or whatever that may be, and then soak it up. Want to learn, want to improve, and understand from a humility standpoint, I want to be better tomorrow than I have been today.
Great advice. Great advice. Let me let me leave you with this last question. What question should I have asked you in this interview that I didn't ask?
Um,
Or
You
maybe
know-
we covered everything.
You know, I think the one thing I would want to impress upon your listeners and our colleagues within the country is that during these tough times, and it's been tough from a COVID standpoint, what our athletic directors are doing, then the social issues that we're dealing with and whatever. Just remember, keep fighting the fight. Keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is that you get the opportunity to serve the most precious commodity that we have, and that's our children. And our children are dependent on us to lead in a manner that's reflective of what leadership should be. I don't want to debate anything. What I do know is that there's a certain expectation that I have for my leaders and the people I want to be around. And that's the NIAAA. That's our people. And so in these tough times, keep fighting the fight, keep leading with distinction, and keep encouraging young people. And again, the other thing I would say to my fellow colleagues, reach out to your other athletic administrators, check on them, make sure they're doing okay, make sure that you have that network and you're following up with your friends and your colleagues to make sure that they're all right during these difficult times. I thank you for this opportunity to be able, number one, to share with you, to be able to share with the UIAAA, but also the opportunity to share about the NIAAA as well.
Thank you so much. That pretty much leads us to the conclusion of this week's UIAAA Connection podcast. Once again, our guest has been the famous Phil Bad Moon Rison, Associate Director of the NIAAA. Thanks so much again, Phil, for joining us. And to our listeners, we'll see you again. Well, we won't see you. We'll hear us again next Friday. Thanks.